first outside hitter for...
If I told you there's a volleyball player who's been named best libero at nearly every major international tournament, you'd probably assume he makes impossible diving saves with unbelievable reflexes. But here's the twist. His greatest skill isn't digging the ball, it's knowing where the spike is going before it's even hit. When people fall in love with volleyball, it's usually because of the spectacular moments. The 130 km/h spike, the monster block, the impossible jump serve that leaves everyone frozen. The libero almost never gets those highlights. Yet coaches will tell you that losing an elite libero can completely change the identity of a team. That sounds exaggerated until you watch France with Jenia Grebennikov. Every offense begins with someone keeping the ball alive. That's where Grebennikov quietly changes everything. Unlike most defenders who react after the hitter swings, he often seems to start moving before contact even happens. That's why people who only watch the ball often underestimate him. People who watch the court can't stop watching him. Because the real skill isn't making spectacular digs, it's knowing where the spectacular dig is going to be needed. For years, commentators have described Grebennikov as having unbelievable reflexes, but that explanation doesn't go far enough. Reflexes alone don't make someone appear in the correct position hundreds of times every match. Reading the game does, and that's where his real advantage begins. If you ask a young defender how to dig harder spikes, they'll probably talk about faster reactions. Ask an elite libero, and the conversation starts much earlier, long before the hitter even jumps. By the time the ball reaches an outside hitter, Grebennikov has already collected an incredible amount of information. Individually, those clues don't mean much. Together, they form a prediction. That's why Grebennikov rarely looks surprised. He's not guessing, he's constantly narrowing down the most likely options. Former players often describe defense as solving a puzzle that changes every second. The ball is only one piece of that puzzle. The hitters, the setter, the blockers, and the previous rallies all matter just as much. Grebennikov processes all of it almost instinctively. That's also why he almost never starts completely still. Before most viewers even realized the block had happened, he had sprinted underneath it, spread his platform, popped the ball back into play, and allowed France to attack again. The sequence lasted only a couple of seconds, but players everywhere noticed the same thing. That wasn't reaction speed, it was anticipation. Even experienced coaches pointed to the clip as a masterclass in reading block coverage rather than chasing the ball after it was already falling. The rally remains one of the defining defensive highlights of France's Olympic title run. And once you understand that, something else suddenly becomes obvious. The famous dives aren't actually the most impressive part of his defense. The most impressive part is how rarely he needs them. If anticipation tells Grebennikov where the ball is going, footwork is what allows him to actually get there. This is the part that even experienced volleyball fans tend to overlook, because television follows the ball, not the defender. By the time the camera catches Grebennikov making a spectacular dig, the most important work has already happened. His feet have done the job. He stays incredibly light on his feet, using short shuffle steps, quick drop steps, and constant micro adjustments that keep his hips underneath him. He looks relaxed because he's never committing his weight too early. At any moment, he can still move left, right, forward, or backward. That's why his defense looks almost effortless. He's not scrambling, he's arriving. Another detail that separates him from almost everyone else is how quiet his platform stays. Many defenders swing their arms toward the ball as they receive it. That creates extra movement, making the ball harder to control. Grebennikov does the opposite. His platform is usually presented early, with minimal arm motion through contact. The power comes from the hitter. His job is simply to absorb it, using the angle of his forearms and the stability of his posture to redirect the ball toward the setter's zone. That's much harder than it sounds. Imagine trying to catch a ball traveling faster than a car driving through city traffic. Except you can't use your hands. Every small change in wrist angle changes where the ball goes. Every movement of the shoulders changes the trajectory. If the platform breaks apart by just a few degrees, the setter suddenly has to chase the second contact instead of running the offense. Grebennikov's platform almost never collapses under pressure. That's why even his hardest digs often float cleanly into the middle of the court, rather than ricocheting toward the advertising boards. Former French national team coach Laurent Tilly often emphasized that great defense isn't measured by simply touching the ball. The objective is to keep the offense alive, and Grebennikov consistently turns defensive contacts into playable balls rather than emergency saves. He doesn't just save rallies, he changes what his own team is capable of doing next. There's a phrase coaches use all the time. First contact determines everything. It sounds simple, but it's one of the biggest truths in volleyball. The cleaner the first touch, the more options the setter has. The more options the setter has, the harder it becomes for the blockers to read the play. And when the blockers hesitate for even a fraction of a second, attackers suddenly see open court instead of closed hands. That's why an elite libero influences points without ever touching the second or third contact. Grebennikov is one of the best examples of this chain reaction. None of that starts with the setter, it starts with the libero. The libero doesn't get the satisfaction of finishing rallies. There's no roar after a monster block, no crowd explosion after a jump serve ace. Most of the applause comes a few seconds later, when somebody else scores because of the work you did first. That requires a completely different mindset. That mentality followed him throughout his club career as well. Whether it was with Cucini Lube Civitanova, Zenit St. Petersburg, or Itas Trentino, coaches consistently relied on him to stabilize serve reception against some of the most dangerous servers in the sport. Across different leagues, different teammates, and different tactical systems, one thing never changed. The first contact became more reliable the moment Grebennikov stepped onto the court. And somehow, year after year, Grebennikov has remained one of the world's benchmark defenders. Maybe that's why his highlights keep going viral. Fans see the dive, players see the read, coaches see the positioning. Each group watches the exact same rally and comes away impressed for a different reason. So let's go back to the question we started with. How can someone who never scores, never blocks, and almost never appears on the stat sheet be one of the most valuable players on the court? Because volleyball isn't won by the player who touches the ball last. It's often won by the player who refuses to let the rally end in the first place. The spectacular dive is simply the part we notice. The real masterpiece happened 3 seconds earlier. That's why teammates trust him. That's why setters love playing behind him. And that's why, after nearly a decade at the very top of international volleyball, Jenia Grebennikov is still the standard every aspiring libero is measured against.